But I see my man is here. I want to add him to the stage. I really want to have a conversation with him because he was in the Department of Defense. I am eager to hear what Michael Maloof has to say. Michael Maloof, former.
Good morning.
Good morning to you too. How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
Hanging in there for the long haul.
Michael Maloof, he's former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author and a regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense, which is why I wanted to talk to you. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Thank you. Good.
So there are two main topics I want to hit. Hegseth, I might as well get that out the way because that's the quickest to discuss. I was asked.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I was asked on a show. Oh, by the way, Canadian. Jesus Christ, it dropped out of my mind. Oh, Canadian preppers invited me on.
Canadian what?
So there's a show called Canadian Preppers. I was telling my audience, there's a show called Canadian Preppers. And they invited me on to the show to do an interview. The interview is up. I just wanted to give them a plug. I think it went almost like 2 hours. Shout out to him for the invitation. And thank you for the invitation. I think it was good. So I'm looking for the Hegseth clip because he is not doing himself a service in some of these interviews. In some of them, he seems like he is, I don't want to say on something, but in one clip, the first time this came out, the signal leaks from Walls, he was clearly lying through his teeth in the entire interview. The second clip from the signal leaks, apparently there was a second issue of signal leaks. Apparently he invited family members onto it. And in those leaks, there were, for lack of a better word, war plans. He copied and pasted into the signal leak, apparently. If I'm not mistaken, Politico published those leaks so people could see effectively what they were. Now, the question that people are asking is, should Hegseth be fired for this? When that question was asked to me, I really couldn't answer the question. I don't know. I know John Kiriakou was put in a cage for leaking the fact that we were torturing people, meaning in that occasion, it rose to the level of putting him in a cage. Hegseth is head of the Department of Defense, and they're just asking, should he be fired for this failure? This is Hegseth's explanation, by the way, and I want to get your take on his explanation.
Fighters work for the president, and none of this is based in reality.
So, Mr. Secretary, I guess I can conclude this. We know some bizarre situation with Michael Waltz happened with the first time the whole thing with the Signal app came out. You believe this came out, they said it was called Team Huddle, because one of the people who work for you, one of the three who no longer are there, leaked this out as a way to get back at you?
That's right, Brian. When you dismiss people who you believe are leaking classified information, and again, the investigation is ongoing and that will take time, and when the evidence produced, it will go to DOJ, why would it surprise anybody, Brian, if those very same people keep leaking to the very same reporters whatever information they think they can have to try to sabotage the agenda of the president or the secretary? So once a leaker, always a leaker, often a leaker.
For one, he does not have the cadence of a Secretary of Defense. I want to say that. He, like the way he communicates is kind of weird, especially if you're thinking about Lloyd Austin. I forget the one that came before that, but all of them had a very calm, deliberate way of communicating. That is not him. But let's put that to the side. He brought in family members, but he doesn't describe family members as leakers, if that makes sense. He's describing somebody else as a leaker. Now, maybe the other person is a leaker, fair enough, but he is bringing in family members to war plans that he copied and pasted onto his Signal thing. How does he not know better? I guess that's my question. And two, is this a fireable offense? And let's postulate for a moment. Yes, there are people who want to humiliate Donald Trump and they want to embarrass him by getting rid of Hegseth. But does this rise to the level of a fireable offense for the DOD? Should he be dismissed?
Well, you've got a lot of elements here involved here. Number one, Pete Hegseth claims that what was revealed was not classified. Yet, by definition, a leak is the release of an unauthorized leak of classified information. So, was the information classified or not? To be a leaker, you cannot leak unclassified information. You leak classified information by definition. Mm-hmm. Then you're a leaker, and you should be investigated. But Hegseth was saying, well, the information contained in the Signal chat was not classified. I don't know if it was classified or not. I have to leave that to the classifiers. But number three, it's strange to me that there's a Signal app, a commercial Signal app on a government phone.
Yeah.
Signal is controlled is a U.S. product. That means the intelligence community has the backdoor keys, and it can be manipulated. It can be, and people can be put on there unbeknownst to the people who initiate the call. Anything, they can wreak havoc, and it's the same old story from the first Trump administration, where you had the intelligence community just out to get Trump and anybody who stood in their way. And we saw that with Mike Flynn. So I share, and John Kiriakou and I have a similar problem. He got jailed. I did not, but we were both whistleblowers in our own way. And but I was forced to testify before Congress under subpoena. I had no choice, or I'd go to jail. These were on investigations, congressional investigations. I knew when that happened, my career was over. I knew it.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of time. But then there were anonymous leaks to the press, and just sharing from my own experience by people who were in the intelligence community. And I even had Seymour Hersh, who has real good contacts in the CIA, come to me and say, well, his contacts say they're really out to get you, Michael.
Wow.
Yeah. And this was in October of 2001.
Yeah.
And 2001, right after 9/11. And at that time, we had open warfare between CIA and Rumsfeld. And and the whole idea was because we were going after terrorists, and the responsibility I had at the direction of the undersecretary at the time was to come up with a game plan on identifying the terrorist groups worldwide, find their choke points, and then work with SOCOM to attack them. I did all that, and we had to do it on a real fast basis. And the agency refused to cooperate with us. Refused. And they told me, look, we're around all the time, but you and your friends will come and go, but we'll always be here.
But what was the CIA?
So my point is, I question whether the information that was allegedly leaked was classified, number one. Number two, I question the fact that a government entity, particularly on national security issues, is even discussed on a commercial app, and it should not be. That tells me it was all a setup. It's created during the Biden administration, I might add. But number three, there are ways in which the principals can communicate on classified issues on government authorized phones that are shielded for national security. Nobody said that this commercial app with commercial encryption is suitable to discuss national security level information.
Right.
And I think there ought to be a general statement that goes out from the White House that app will no longer be used, period, on government business. That needs to be done. That needs to be clarified. So, but I also share, I have mixed reaction to all this. I also share Hegseth's concerns of being undermined. And lastly, because he is the Secretary of Defense, his spouse has a clearance. He has a skiff in his own house. He has a secure line. He has a SNU-3 in his own house. He has the means to store classified in his own house just by virtue of his position.
Wow.
His brother, I understand, has a clearance, security clearance, and works at the Defense Department. So there's this press notion that his family members had access to me is a ruse. But you don't know that unless you've worked within the system.
Wait a minute. Why does his wife have a clearance?
Because by virtue of the fact that she's married to him, and she has to go through a certain clearance process. And
But
you have spouses of CIA people. They have to be cleared.
Well, being cleared is different than having a clearance, or is it?
Well, they have to at least have a secret clearance.
Are you serious? So if I'm married and I am, let's say, in the CIA or something to that effect, my wife maybe go through any clearance saying, okay,
But he's the Secretary of Defense. Now, when I worked at the Defense Department, I had all the clearances, but my wife did not. No, but I wouldn't discuss anything. But you see, he's the Secretary of Defense. He's authorized to take stuff home. He has stuff stored in his house. And by virtue of talking to people, she has to have a certain amount of a level of clearance just by virtue of the position.
So he could come home and he could.
Now they can come back and dispute that. I don't care, but that used to be the case.
I guess my point is, he can go home and he can tell his wife, "Hey, we're going to bomb Yemen. We're going to do it on this date. We're going to use these assets to do it." And
I don't know what the content of the of the exchange was. I don't know that it went on such and such a date at such and such a time. I don't know that it said that, and that we're going to use these assets. I've never really seen.
Well, I'm just pointing out if indeed she has a clearance, that he can tell her anything that he's doing as Secretary of Defense.
No, there's certain things you can't go above a certain level.
Okay,
but so there has to be a warm and fuzzy, a national security warm and fuzzy.
I get the sense that they're not going to make that distinction. They're going to say, "What the hell is his wife and brother doing on the chat?" That they have nothing to do with.
Look at the President of the United States. Look at his wife. What does she do? Yet she can sit in on cabinet meetings and things like that.
I mean, Joe Biden's wife was running cabinet meetings.
Yeah. And I'm certain that national security information was discussed. Who's going to tell the president, no, you can't bring your wife in? No, they're not going to do that. And the Secretary of Defense similarly has given his position and accesses, and the fact that he has this information at home, and it can happen anytime, day or night. People can come on over. He has a SNU-3 in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh man, I'm dodgy on this one. Because for me, it's
that's why I say that this is not a cut and dry thing.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. This is not cut and dry. But they got to stop using that commercial app of Signal on government phones.
Agreed. He should know better. They should know better.
Well, no, wait a minute. It was authorized by the government. So who authorized it? It had to have been the intelligence community that authorized it.
By the way, why was the CIA going after you? I mean, if your job was, I think I know why, but why were they?
Because we were doing their work and we were exposing the fact that they hadn't done the analysis and they didn't have the answers that the secretary needed in near real time. And here I was coming in, asking for that information, doing the analysis when it would take them 6 months to a year to do it. and I had to have an answer like day after tomorrow.
I see.
I had Wolfowitz at one point say to me, "We're about ready to go to war. We don't know who we're going to be fighting," and we stopped referring to terrorist groups.
You know what's wild about that? And this is not what I brought you on, but what is that document called? The Afghan Files, if I remember correctly. They point that out in the Afghan Files, that at some point they were like, we have no idea who we're fighting. Like, it was very, they were doing this kind of lessons
and
learned.
We had so many leaks. We had elements within the DIA, CIA against the policy level people because we were going full speed ahead trying to do this. And we had people at DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, not coordinating on packages we were moving up to get action and get sign-offs by the secretary. We finally told them, look, just non-coordinate, but move the package along rather than holding it up because we're on a timeline.
That's what I want to get to. So I had a great guest yesterday, Brian Berletic. And Brian has a view that on some level I think is right, that much of what happens in the world is not disparate things, that there's a coordinated plan at work, whether it's the tariff thing, for example, with the goal being, okay, well, we need to isolate ourselves from China because we're preparing for this kind of pivot to China. We don't necessarily want their market or to be exposed economically in the way that Europe was exposed when Russia gas and everything stopped. Whether it's in regards to the discussions that are taking place now in regards to Ukraine, it's like, okay, we lost, but we'll come back and revisit this NATO thing later, and we will try to go after the Russians again. Whether it's with China and choke points, like it's like, okay, we can't let this horse get out the barn, so we're going to get Panama, we're going to get Greenland, we're going to be able to stop Chinese ships. Like, this stuff's policy papers that these guys have effectively written in ways of trying to maintain U.S. dominance and superiority. How much of this is enacted in government? Like, when you're in the Department of Defense and you're looking out at these threats to, let's say, the primacy of the United States, the superiority, how much does policy papers written by think tanks, written by, I'll go with think tanks, affect the policy of any particular individual administration? I mean, because honestly, for one, the Iran negotiation, for example, Path to Persia, policy document, I can send it to you, has the notion of we should negotiate with Iran, but we should let Israel attack Iran in order to have some level of distance away from it, because our objective is to get rid of Iran. And, you know, as I told you before, I'm very dodgy on a lot of this stuff because I've seen this kind of through line where they've taken down one government after the next throughout the Middle East, with Iran being the last man standing. Wesley Clark said Iran was going to be the last man standing. How much does these policy papers affect actual policy in the Department of Defense?
I think they have an influence, but it really depends upon events that are occurring, because nothing, you cannot just predict the future like that, and everything falls into place as accordingly. They do have influence. They do represent a certain point of view. They may even reflect a certain government's point of view, and they may even be partially paid by a certain government, like the Saudis or the Israelis, dependent upon the think tank and the influences. They don't give you a fair and balanced, objective point of view. They're just, let's go. When they have to come to me and ask me to come up with a game plan, when they came to me, I should say, and asked me to come up with a game plan and gave me only a weekend to do it, there was no think tank information available that outlined the way forward. Yeah, we were in uncharted waters, and we had to move quickly to respond to an attack that occurred on our soil, and we knew who it was, but we didn't know where they were. We didn't know who they were affiliated with, because none of that analysis had been done. And that's why I was asked, because of my own analytical background, to come in and do that over a weekend, and then team up with SOCOM to once we had identified the choke points, to have SOCOM basically implement a plan to take them out.
But would you agree with me that George Bush used 9/11 as a pretext to enact Project for a New American Century? Like, meaning, yeah,
Did
we
he
have
do what?
Project for a New American Century. It was this document that effectively was like, we're going to reshape the Middle East into this kind of American, use American power to change the Middle East. And in the same way, where it's like, okay, well, we're going to go to certain people to do certain things, but there are things that they're doing with the aim of accomplishing a particular objective. Meaning, they would come to you and they say, Michael, we need you to do X, Y, Z. And you do your job. You do X, Y, Z. And somebody else is doing X, Y, Z. And somebody else is doing X, Y, Z. But all of these things are aiming to accomplish a particular objective that has been written out in this kind of neocon policy paper of reshaping the Middle East with American power.
Let me just say that back then, the whole notion at the time of Iraq was to in 2003 was to go after up until a certain point was to look at terrorist groups affiliated with Iraq. But then that shifted to WMD, and immediately we knew that wasn't a good basis, because we had no information, and certainly we had inspectors in and out of that country for some time since Desert Shield, Desert Storm back in the late 90s to verify, like Scott Ritter's guys.
Right.
Go in and look for these things, look for it, and there was nothing available. And I would move a memo up saying, we don't have that kind of evidence. It didn't matter. Everything shifted from the affiliation with terrorism to WMD, and that notion came out of the CIA. They keep blaming the Defense Department for having instigated that notion, but it wasn't. It came out of George. Whoever, what was it?
Oh, I know you're talking about. God, what is his name? George Tenet.
Tenet. Yeah.
Yeah.
That came out of Tenet. That came out of Tenet's group, and he and Rumsfeld at the time had a very love-hate relationship. Let's put it that way. And it went back to the days when Rumsfeld worked out of the CIA to undertake a government, a congressionally mandated study on the outside threats of missile attacks on the United States. And he would reside there, and he would call in us from the other agencies to give him background, because he wasn't getting that information from Tenet's own people. And every time I'd go and I briefed Rumsfeld about 5 times at CIA. And every time I would finish a briefing, he'd call Tenet and say, why can't I get this information from your people?
Wow.
And that's where, and then they said, well, you got it from Maloof. Well, that's why I became the persona non grata, if you will, in their eyes, because they felt that I was undermining their rice bowl.
Yeah, but they weren't giving him the data. They didn't need it.
They were giving him information. They gave him a place to reside, but I don't think he was because everything was so compartmented at that time. They would tell Rumsfeld, who had all the tickets, look, this is compartmented. You're not authorized to have it. He says, I have all the clearances. I have a congressional mandate to do this study, and you're not going to give me the information? This is what we had to contend with constantly. We had interagency disputes like this constantly. We had a war within our own group.
Yeah.
And how could we effectively fight an outside enemy with that kind of internal opposition?
I guess that's kind of my point, though. Like, they compartmentalize the information almost. I think it's as
they're doing it again. They're doing it again.
George Bush made the choice to attack a country based on weapons of mass destruction, and they compartmentalized information to craft data that was dodgy and use sacrifice, Colin Powell, at the altar of
Oh yeah, Colin Powell was set up.
Yeah.
He had George Tenet sitting behind him at the UN the day that he gave that speech about the evidence that they had of WMD, and it was all a ruse.
A ruse to get us into a war, to reshape the Middle East.
And this gets then to the General Clark statements and others, and I was flat out told the same thing, that Baghdad was going to be the hub from which we would then launch regime change to the surrounding countries that were in opposition to Israel at the time.
That's my point, right? Like I think that's Brian's point. That yes,
well, it's true.
That's disturbing. That's very disturbing.
I had it told directly to me. You've heard it from General Clark, and now you got this additional source of information.
John Kiriakou, one time when we were doing an interview, he pointed out, he said he was sitting at a meeting and he was like taking notes for, I forget who was his lead in that meeting. And what is his name? Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney comes on like a screen, and Dick Cheney is like, all right, we're going to hit Iraq and we're going to be in Iran in X number of weeks. He said his lead.
But you see, this was the policy emanated very early on, before Wolfowitz came into office, to get regime change against Saddam Hussein, and he worked with Doug Feith, he worked with Richard Pearl, and they were all together in unison with this policy approach of that's why you had the largest embassy in the Middle East was in Baghdad. They built this monstrosity. And it was to be used to fan out and as a hub from which they would then undertake regime change in these other countries. This was a pre-planned thing way before Wolfowitz became the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So they wanted a war, but they needed a basis they could sell to the American people, and when they could not come up with anything, they made something up.
That is disturbing, because
I saw it personally, and I would write memos. We don't have the evidence to support the WMD argument. We have more on the terrorist relationships, but it was George Tenet's people through their NIE, National Intelligence Estimate, back in August of 2002. All of a sudden talking about WMD. What WMD?
So let's move this conversation slightly to Iran. Because what Brian pointed out was there is, and he put it on Twitter so everybody can see it. I think it was called Path to Persia. And it was making an argument for effectively going after Iran and pacifying Iran as a country. And what Brian points out is we are following the exact same playbook. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That's what's happening, because most of the American people are not aware of this background. That's why. So it worked once. Let's try it again. And what's it for? It's all to placate Netanyahu. It's like I've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked by it. We haven't learned a damn thing.
But does it depend on what? I'm conflicted on this. Because from my point of view, no. I agree. Everything you're saying, I think, is true. So it's not that part. Does it depend on what is in the president's mind? Or is it auto? Like, meaning, if Bush was different, would they have gone with that plan? And if Trump is in this thinking, I don't want this larger war, which is the reason why I'm sitting Witkoff, I'm trying to get a deal. Does it depend on the president?
Well, but Trump seems to be more of an independent thinker. Bush was being guided by Cheney. Bush was not the sharpest knife in the drawer, okay?
Right. He sent Witkoff, which is the thing I kind of lean on. Like, you could have sent Rubio. You could have sent Kellogg. You could have sent, like, there are various people you could send that would be a hard line, that would be like Meaning,
But you see, the guys you just mentioned are so jaundiced with their neocon perspective. They've already come in with this. They've already talked about wanting to hit Iran or hit Russia. They come to the table with these preconceived notions without coming in and trying to work out a compromise.
yeah.
They're not.
Witkoff.
That's not. Yeah, Witkoff seems to, even though he's pro-Israeli, he seems to be saying things that in which they want to talk peace.
Yeah.
There's something to work out here. I think they can bring in the Russians, and I also think this, and it's very significant to me that Trump is going to be going to Saudi Arabia in a few weeks. But Saudi Arabia has also just sent their foreign minister to Iran, and they're also paying for Syria. And so Trump has seen where Saudi Arabia may be a key, and that fits into what Witkoff is being able to formulate with respect to Iran. So I don't think that and this of course smacks at what Netanyahu wants, I've now heard one report only, not unconfirmed, that he wants to do a limited attack on his own without the U.S. Things don't work out that well.
I saw that story. That story was weird because that story said it would only need limited help from the U.S. And
he won't get any U.S. help. But he wants to do it in his own capacity. Well, if you want to have bombs, if you want to have missiles and hypersonics rain down on your land, be my guest.
But that is exactly the document, Path to Persia. We will negotiate, and we will let Israel do an attack where our hands are clean on the attack. And we would say we had nothing to do with it. That was Netanyahu. And we would come in to help Israel if indeed Iran retaliates.
But as I told you the last time, Israel just looks to find somebody else who will do their dirty work. And as I told you the last time we met, this goes back to the time of Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
it's nothing new in the history of the way Israel, the Jews operate. They can always get someone else to do their dirty work, and this is no exception. But now it's really serious because you're talking about the potential for nuclear weapons.
Michael, this has been an illuminating conversation. It really has. I am fascinated by this conversation. Thank you for this. I didn't know this, by the way. I didn't know. I knew you worked in the Department of Defense. I didn't know in what capacity. I didn't know that type of stuff. This has been illuminating. It is terrifying to me because I think it does give evidence to the fact that these policy documents, even if the president, like you said, is not the sharpest tool in the bunch, that he's listening to other people who know this stuff and is guiding them down a particular path.
Well, Trump goes by his instincts. He doesn't. Why does he want to create another war when he's trying to solve two other wars?
Let me ask you this, and this could be the last question. If Israel does that and attacks Iran, Iran responds. This alienates Trump. If indeed Trump is trying to get an actual deal.
Trump pulls out at that point. He says enough.
You think he pulls out? I'll let you go.
No, I'm fine.
Oh, okay. So Trump, you don't think Trump would respond? You think Trump would actually pull out? Like if Iran retaliates, that Trump would say, all right, you brought it on yourself.
If the Israelis initiated against his will and he's trying to negotiate a peace settlement and work something out, you see, he has other designs. He may want something in return from the Iranians. And I think he just doesn't go in to do something out of the goodness of his heart. I mean, that's why he worked out a minerals deal, not only with Ukraine, but he's also talking a minerals deal with Russia.
Yeah.
What do I get in return?
Yeah, he's transactional.
Yes,
Michael,
yes, he is.
This is a fantastic conversation. Deeply appreciate it. You have no idea. I deeply appreciate this. Fantastic conversation. I love the historical context. It puts things in context in a way. Like we're not behind the scenes, so we don't see it, right? We don't know the stuff that you know on this stuff. I really appreciate this. Michael Maloof, my man. Michael Maloof, he is a former security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributor to many media outlets, and he has nearly 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense. Thank you for this, Michael. You be safe.
You too. Take care.
Have a good one. Oh, that was fantastic.